Amara Johnson had walked into this bank countless times over the past 5 years. She knew every corner of the polished marble floor, the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above, and the faint scent of coffee from the small cafe across the lobby. But today, she felt different. Today, she carried a quiet storm inside her. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, each step a beat of determination and suppressed frustration. She wore her favorite black suit, the one that made her feel both confident and untouchable, and her hair was pulled back neatly. Her appearance commanded attention, but Amara didn't need attention today. She needed respect. She approached the front desk with her usual polite smile, her eyes scanning the room casually, noticing small details, the security guard shifting uncomfortably, a couple of customers whispering nervously, and the tellers glancing at each other with subtle unease. Something in the air felt tense, but she didn't yet know why. Sliding her ID and bank card across the counter, she said, "Good morning. I'd like to make a withdrawal, please." Her voice was calm, measured, but underneath it was an unmistakable edge of firmness, born from years of breaking ceilings and facing people who underestimated her. The teller, a young man with glasses that kept slipping down his nose, typed something into the computer and then looked up with a frown. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't process this withdrawal right now." Amara blinked. Her heart skipped a beat, not from fear, but from confusion and disbelief. She had been banking here for years. This was her account, her money, her hard-earned funds. "Excuse me," she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Can you explain why?" The teller hesitated, glancing nervously at the supervisor who had started to approach. "There's a hold on your account," he said slowly, as if saying the words aloud might make them less true. "We need authorization before we can release the funds." Amara felt a quiet heat rise in her chest. She took a slow breath, placing her hands lightly on the counter. "A hold? I don't recall any hold being placed on my account. I've never had any problems here. What's going on?" Her calm demeanor masked the storm inside her, a mix of frustration, disbelief, and the faint sting of being underestimated. The supervisor, a middle-aged man with a conservative suit and a nervous smile, stepped forward. He shuffled some papers in his hand and cleared his throat. "Ma'am, it's just our policy. At times, we have to freeze certain transactions for verification. You understand, right?" Amara's jaw tightened ever so slightly. "I understand policies," she said evenly, "but I also understand reality. I've been a loyal customer. I've invested millions in this bank. I know the rules better than most of your staff. This isn't right." Her eyes scanned the room subtly, noting the slight tension in the other customers, the unease of the tellers, and the faint twitch in the supervisor's hand. She took another breath, letting her words settle in the air. There was a pause, a long, fragile silence, before she leaned slightly forward. Her presence alone made people shift in their seats, as if the room itself acknowledged her authority. Today wasn't just about money. Today was about reclaiming respect, asserting her place in a world that had often tried to doubt her. Amara's calm, composed exterior concealed a fire that had taken years to tame, a fire built from late nights in the office, years of challenges, and countless moments where she had been underestimated, doubted, or outright ignored. She had climbed every rung of the corporate ladder with resilience and intelligence. Today, she would not be denied. Her hand rested lightly on her ID card. Again, her voice soft but firm. "Let's try this one more time," she said. "I want this withdrawal processed now." The teller swallowed hard, glancing at his supervisor. The supervisor's face had gone pale, his earlier confidence fading. Amara noticed the change instantly. She didn't move, didn't flinch. She just waited. The tension in the room thickened, but she stood like a calm storm, ready to unleash the force of her truth if necessary. The supervisor cleared his throat again, his fingers drumming nervously on the edge of the counter. Amara watched him carefully, her eyes calm but sharp, like a hawk observing a rabbit that thought it had escaped. "Ma'am," he began slowly, "I'm afraid we can't approve this withdrawal right now." Amara's heart tightened not from fear, but from disbelief. She blinked, forcing herself to stay composed. "You can't?" she asked, her voice steady, but carrying a quiet intensity. "I've been banking here for years. My account is in perfect standing. I've never had a single issue. Why now?" The supervisor's gaze wavered. He shuffled some papers, glanced at the teller, then back at her. "It's standard protocol. We need verification for large withdrawals. There are procedures." Amara raised her hand slightly, interrupting him, though her gesture was calm, not rude. "Procedures are fine," she said, "but I am not asking for favors. I am asking for what is mine. I know your procedures. I built relationships here. I know the rules better than most of your staff. And yet, somehow, I'm being denied access to my own money. Why?" The teller looked down at the keyboard, typing quickly, as if the rapid motion might erase his discomfort. The supervisor shifted awkwardly, trying to maintain authority that was slipping like sand through his fingers. The other customers had started to notice. A few whispered quietly to each other, their eyes darting between Amara and the staff. Sensing the tension but not understanding the full story, Amara took a deep breath. She felt her pulse rising not in panic, but in the steady rhythm of controlled anger. She had faced dismissive colleagues, doubting investors, and even strangers who judged her because of the color of her skin or the softness of her voice. She had faced it all and come out stronger every time. And now, in this small bank branch, she was facing the same disbelief and hesitation, but she would not back down. "I am the account holder," she said clearly, each word measured, each syllable intentional. "I am requesting access to my funds. This is not negotiable. I am entitled to this. You may have your policies, but they do not apply in a way that can deny me my rights." The supervisor's hands trembled slightly, and the teller froze. Amara's presence filled the room like a tide rising calm on the surface but carrying immense power underneath. She could feel the uncertainty ripple through the staff, their eyes flicking nervously to the security cameras, the other customers, and each other. No one had ever spoken to them like this. They were used to quiet, compliant client snot, someone who commanded respect with every word, every posture, every calm yet unyielding gaze. A faint frustration tightened Amara's chest. She could feel it, that mix of indignation and disbelief, that small flame inside that refused to be snuffed out. She wanted to scream, but instead, she stayed poised, her calmness sharper than any shout. The power in her restraint was undeniable. "I will ask again," she said, her voice soft, but unrelenting. "Please explain why I cannot access my account. I am not leaving until I have an answer." The supervisor swallowed hard, his throat dry. He was suddenly aware of the disparity between her quiet authority and his own wavering confidence. He glanced around, hoping for support from someone else, but the other staff avoided his eyes. The room was quiet, the usual hum of banking life replaced with tension and anticipation. Amara's gaze never left him. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. Yet the authority in her presence demanded honesty, respect, and recognition. And deep down, the staff knew that denying her now would not only be wrong, they feared the consequences. She waited, silent but impossible to ignore. The air felt heavy, every heartbeat in the room synchronized with her quiet, unshakable determination. This was no longer just a withdrawal. This was about acknowledgement, about breaking through assumptions, about proving that respect could not be bought, earned, or assumed it had to be recognized. The supervisor's face had turned pale, the confident air he carried when he first approached Amara completely gone. He shuffled his papers again, as if holding them tightly could somehow make the situation more manageable. Amara noticed every twitch, every subtle sign of discomfort. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone was enough to command the room. "Ma'am," he began again, his voice cracking slightly. "We have to follow protocol. We cannot just—" Amara leaned slightly forward, resting her hands on the counter. Her voice was calm, soft even, but it carried the weight of someone who had spent a lifetime being underestimated. "Protocol is fine for ordinary people," she said slowly, letting each word sink in. "But I am not ordinary. I am the CEO of Johnson Tech Enterprises. I built my company from the ground up. I have worked harder than most of your staff can. Imagine, I have earned my place in this world, and I do not tolerate disrespect, ignorance, or denial of what is mine." The supervisor swallowed hard. His eyes darted around the room, looking for support from his staff, but there was none. The tellers avoided his gaze, and the other customers had stopped whispering. They were watching, captivated by the quiet storm standing before them. Amara's voice grew firmer, but it never rose. She was in complete control, every gesture deliberate, every word precise. "Do you understand that I am asking for access to my own money?" she said, her tone almost serene, yet impossible to ignore. "I am not asking for permission. I am requesting what I rightfully own. Denying me now is not only wrong, it is beneath the standards of this institution, and I will not accept it." The supervisor's hands shook slightly as he fumbled with the papers in front of him. He had read the policies, memorized the procedures, yet none of it mattered now. The woman standing in front of him radiated authority that no manual could teach. For a moment, he froze entirely, as if his mind could not comprehend the reality before him. Amara noticed his hesitation, the brief flicker of fear in his eyes, but she didn't mock him. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. "Let me remind you," she continued, her tone even, calm, and unyielding. "I am not just a client. I am the CEO, the founder, and the controlling shareholder. I own this bank." "Yes," she said, leaning forward slightly, "I own this bank, and right now, you are refusing a transaction that belongs to me." The words hung in the air like a striking bell. Silence fell heavier than any sound. The tellers froze mid-motion. The other customers leaned forward, their eyes wide with shock. Even the security guard stopped shifting his weight, unsure if he should intervene or stay still. The supervisor's mouth opened, then closed. He couldn't find words. No amount of policy, no amount of training could have prepared him for this moment. Amara straightened, her eyes locking on his. She did not raise her voice. She did not demand. She simply allowed the weight of truth to settle. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the air itself had shifted in her favor. She was calm, controlled, yet utterly powerful. The supervisor's mind raced. He thought of excuses, of explanations, of ways to navigate the embarrassment, but nothing worked. He realized, finally, that this was bigger than him. He had underestimated her. He had assumed she was just another client, someone he could deny without consequence. He had been wrong. Amara's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly, but the authority never left her. "I will not argue further," she said quietly. "I will not repeat myself. I am entitled to my own funds, and I will access them now." Her words were simple, clear, and final. The tension in the room was palpable, but for the first time, Amara allowed a small, quiet satisfaction to enter her chest. She had not raised her voice. She had not yelled. She had only spoken her truth, and that truth carried power no policy could deny. The supervisor's face had gone pale, his confidence completely eroded. He glanced around the room as if searching for allies, but the tellers avoided his eyes, and the customers had fallen silent, mesmerized by the quiet power standing before them. Amara did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm composure, her unwavering gaze, and the weight behind her words were enough to make the room tremble. Amara leaned slightly forward, her hands resting lightly on the counter, and spoke again. "Do you understand what you're denying?" Her voice was soft, but heavy with authority. "I am not a regular customer walking into a bank. I am the person who owns this bank. I built my company from nothing, invested my resources wisely, and earned my place here. Your hesitation is not just unnecessary, it's disrespectful." The supervisor swallowed hard, his hands clenching the papers he had been holding. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "I thought." Amara shook her head slowly. "You thought wrong," she said calmly. Her eyes swept the room, taking in every detail, the fearful glance of the teller, the wide-eyed curiosity of the other customers, the tension in the air that had thickened with each passing moment. She felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. Triumph, because finally her presence commanded recognition. Sadness, because she knew this moment of disbelief would not be the last she faced in a world still too quick to doubt her. She leaned forward a little more, her tone soft but impossible to ignore. "I am the CEO of Johnson Tech Enterprises. I am the founder and the controlling shareholder. This bank, this institution is part of my portfolio. I am not asking for access as a favor. I am asking for what is already mine. You may follow policies, but policies do not allow you to deny the rightful owner of the bank." The supervisor froze entirely. His mouth opened, closed, and opened again. His earlier authority had dissolved into panic, and now he faced the full reality of his mistake. The tellers stood behind him, silent and uneasy. For a few long moments, no one spoke. Amara straightened, allowing the weight of her presence to settle over the room like a quiet storm. "Let me be clear," she continued, her voice calm and deliberate. "I am entitled to my funds. You are not in a position to question or delay this. I built my company. I invested in this bank, and I earned this right. Denying me now is not only wrong, it is an insult to every ounce of work I have done to get here." The supervisor's hands shook as he finally looked up at her. I didn't realize," he whispered. His words were weak, his mind racing to find a way out, but there was none. He had underestimated her. And now the weight of that mistake pressed down on him. Amara felt a quiet, satisfying shift in the room. The customers' whispers had stopped. Even the security guard seemed frozen, unsure whether to step forward or step back. Every eye was on her, drawn to her calm authority, the quiet power in her words, and the undeniable truth she carried. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to threaten. She simply stood tall and spoke her truth. "I am not angry," she said softly, almost like a whisper meant only for him, though the room heard every word. "I am disappointed that your assumptions allowed this moment to happen, but I will not let it stop me. I will access my account, because it is mine. You may process the transaction, or you may stand in the way of someone who built more than you can comprehend. The choice is yours." The supervisor's face drained of color. He glanced at the tellers for reassurance, but there was none. He finally nodded, almost imperceptibly, and began to type rapidly on the keyboard. Amara allowed herself a brief, subtle smile. She had not raised her voice. She had not demanded. She had simply reminded them of the truth so powerful it could not be ignored. For the first time in the room, a sense of order returned. The tellers resumed their work, slower now, more deliberate. The supervisor's shoulders slumped, the tension leaving him in small, reluctant breaths. And Amara, standing tall and composed, knew that the moment had changed more than just a transaction. It had shifted the way people saw her, and perhaps the way they saw power itself. The room was silent, heavy with disbelief. The supervisor's hands hovered awkwardly over the keyboard, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Even the tellers, who had once seemed composed and professional, now looked nervous, unsure of how to act in the presence of someone who radiated authority without raising a voice. Amara remained calm, standing tall with her hands lightly resting on the counter. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, scanned the room. She noticed every subtle reaction, the tellers exchanging anxious glances, the customers leaning forward in quiet curiosity, the security guard shifting his weight, as if unsure where to focus. All of them were witnessing a power they had rarely seen before, a quiet, undeniable command that demanded respect. "I want to make this very clear," Amara said, her tone soft but sharp, like a blade cutting through hesitation. "I am not asking for special treatment. I am not asking for favors. I am asking for what is mine. I built my company from the ground up. I invested wisely. I earned every right, and this bank is part of my life's work. You may have policies, but they do not override ownership." The supervisor swallowed hard, his throat dry. I didn't know," he muttered, almost under his breath. He glanced around, as if searching for someone to rescue him from the weight of the moment. But there was no one. The tellers avoided his eyes. The other customers were frozen, and even the security guard remained still. He realized, with a growing sense of panic, that this was not just about a withdrawal anymore. This was about authority, recognition, and a truth he had failed to acknowledge. Amara's lips curved into the faintest smile, subtle but unmistakable. She felt a strange mixture of triumph and sorrow. Triumph, because finally her presence, her words, her very existence, demanded acknowledgement. Sorrow, because moments like this still happened, in 2025, in a world that should have understood equality but often failed to do so. She had faced assumptions, biases, and disbelief all her life, but she had learned to stand tall, to let her truth speak louder than ignorance. The supervisor's hands trembled as he began typing rapidly, attempting to process her request. His movements were awkward, almost mechanical, and his eyes never left her. The tellers, too, worked slowly, careful not to make a mistake, careful not to provoke further confrontation. The tension in the room was electric. Amara's presence filled the space like a storm that had been quietly brewing for years, and now, finally, it had arrived. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need to threaten. Her calm, unyielding authority demanded respect on its own. The room seemed to shrink around her, everyone acutely aware that they were standing in the presence of someone extraordinary, because of wealth or title alone, but because of the sheer force of self-assurance and truth. She allowed herself a small sigh, almost imperceptible, as the teller finally completed the withdrawal process. The cash was counted carefully, with several eyes watching, almost afraid to breathe too loudly. Amara took the stack of bills in her hand, feeling the weight, but more importantly, feeling the validation. This was not just a was a statement. The supervisor finally looked up, his face pale and defeated. He had underestimated her. He had assumed, as many did, that she could be denied without consequence. And now, he realized, that assumption had been not just wrong, but humiliating. He nodded weakly, words failing him, aware that he had been schooled, not through anger or argument, but through presence, confidence, and truth. Amara's gaze softened, ever so slightly, not in pity, but in quiet acknowledgement of their realization. "Remember this moment," she said softly, almost to herself but loud enough for them all to hear. "Never assume that someone's calm is weakness. Never assume that respect is optional. True power is quiet, steady, and unshakable." The tellers exchanged glances, the supervisor exhaled shakily, and the customers whispered among themselves, still stunned. Outside the counter area, life seemed to return, but inside, a lesson had been learned, one that would linger far longer than any policy or procedure. Amara straightened, adjusted her blazer, and smiled faintly. She had won not through confrontation, not through anger, but through truth, confidence, and the undeniable weight of her presence. Today, they had learned that authority wasn't always loud. Sometimes, It simply walked in quietly and changed everything. The moment had shifted. The supervisor, once brimming with authority, now seemed like a man trying to grasp at shadows. Every keystroke he made trembled with hesitation. The tellers were frozen in place, their movements slow, deliberate, almost reverent. Amara's calm, controlled presence had transformed the room into something heavier than air, something charged with undeniable respect. She held the cash in her hands but felt its significance go beyond money. This was not just a withdrawal, it was a reclaiming of dignity, a statement of authority that no procedure, no policy, and no assumption could ever deny. She looked at the supervisor directly, her gaze steady, her posture perfect. "I suggest we proceed without further complications," she said, her voice quiet, yet carrying the weight of someone who had been underestimated too many times to count. The supervisor nodded, almost mechanically. He could no longer hide the mixture of fear and respect in his eyes. He realized he had underestimated the power of calm confidence, the authority that came not from shouting, but from a lifetime of building, investing, and proving oneself repeatedly. Every word Amara had spoken had been a reminder that authority was earned, visible in presence, and not something to be questioned lightly. The tellers began to finalize the transaction, moving carefully, their hands slightly trembling. Amara watched them, not with anger, but with quiet satisfaction. She understood their discomfort was the discomfort of seeing someone defy assumptions, someone who quietly owned more than they had imagined. For years, people had assumed her silence was weakness. Today, they learned it was power in waiting, a power that did not need to roar to command the room. As the final bills were handed over, Amara counted them calmly. Each note was more than currency, it was a symbol of persistence, resilience, and undeniable truth. She could feel the realization settling into the room, a silent acknowledgement that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not many people walked in and corrected the world's assumptions without raising a voice. She had done it with nothing more than presence, clarity, and unwavering composure. She straightened her blazer, smoothing the lines carefully. The supervisor swallowed hard, finally speaking, his voice low and uncertain. "Ma'am, I apologize. I should have verified more carefully before denying your request." Amara inclined her head slightly, acknowledging his words without bitterness. "Apologies are not necessary," she said softly. "What matters is that respect is recognized. Never assume anything about a person's capabilities, ownership, or authority. Policies do not replace judgment, and assumptions are costly." The room remained quiet. The customers, who had been watching from the chairs nearby, whispered softly among themselves, processing what they had just seen. Some exchanged glances, nodding in silent agreement. A few took out their phones, perhaps to share the story. The impact of her presence lingered, longer than any policy or procedure ever could. Amara took a deep breath, allowing herself a small moment of satisfaction. Today, she had not only accessed her funds, but she had also imparted an unspoken lesson. True authority cannot be faked, ignored, or challenged lightly. It is visible in poise, in confidence, and in the unwavering understanding of one's own worth. Finally, she turned toward the exit. Every step she took echoed softly against the marble floor, a quiet drumbeat of triumph. The staff remained frozen for a few seconds longer, caught between relief and awe. Outside, sunlight streamed into the lobby, warming her face. She held her head high, carrying not just the cash in her hand, but the affirmation of every challenge she had overcome, every barrier she had broken, and every assumption she had disproven as she walked through the doors. The weight of the moment stayed with the staff behind her. Today had been more than a simple withdrawal. Today, they had witnessed a quiet, commanding power that would not be forgotten. And Amara, she moved forward with calm satisfaction, knowing she had turned a simple transaction into a statement of unstoppable strength. Amara stepped out of the bank, the sunlight warm against her face. The city bustled around her, but she moved through it with a quiet grace that made the world feel a little slower, a little more attentive. The cash she carried in her hands was insignificant compared to the feeling inside her chest, a mix of triumph, relief, and a deep, satisfying pride. Today had not just been a transaction, it had been a statement. She walked down the street, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. Every step felt purposeful, a rhythm of authority she had earned through years of determination, struggle, and resilience. Amara reflected on the moment in the bank, the disbelief on the supervisor's face, the frozen tellers, the silence that had settled over the room when she revealed the truth. She allowed herself a small smile. For once, her presence had spoken louder than any title or position ever could. Yet, beneath the satisfaction, there was a lingering ache. She had faced this kind of doubt countless times, not just here, not just in banks, but in boardrooms, at conferences, even in casual conversations. People had underestimated her, questioned her authority, and assumed her silence was weakness. Today, she had corrected one small moment in a long career of challenges, but she knew the world still had far to go before assumptions like that would disappear completely. Amara paused for a moment, looking around at the city she had grown up in. The streets were alive with people who didn't know her, who would never know her story, but who nonetheless would feel the ripple of her presence if they had been in that bank. She had turned disbelief into respect, ignorance into acknowledgement, and hesitation into awareness. It was a quiet victory, but a profound one. The memory of the supervisor's pale face lingered in her mind. He had thought he was in control, but he had failed to recognize the depth of her authority. Amara had not yelled, had not demanded, had not threatened. She had simply stated her truth, and that truth carried weight. It was a reminder to herself, and perhaps to anyone who might hear her story, that confidence, dignity, and unshakable calm could overcome ignorance and arrogance. As she approached the car waiting for her at the curb, she allowed herself a small, quiet laugh. The irony was not lost on her. She had been denied something that was hers by right. Yet by claiming her space with composure and clarity, she had gained far more than she had walked in for. Today, the bank staff had learned a lesson they would not forget. She, too, had reinforced a lesson she had carried throughout her life, that true authority is measured not in anger, but in presence, clarity, and unwavering self-respect. Amara opened the car door and slid into the seat, placing the cash on the passenger side. She leaned back for a moment, closing her eyes and letting herself feel the depth of the moment. This was victory not over a person, but over every assumption that had ever doubted her. It was proof that power did not need to roar. Sometimes, it simply existed. .com/steady and undeniable. As the car pulled away, she looked out the window at the bank. The tellers were returning to their work, the supervisor still pale but aware, the customers whispering among themselves. None of them would forget today. And as much as this was a personal victory, it was also a symbol, a reminder that respect and recognition are not given lightly, but they can be claimed firmly and gracefully by those who know their worth. Amara felt her chest swell with quiet pride. She had walked in for a withdrawal and left having reaffirmed her place in the world. The city moved around her, unaware of the subtle but powerful lesson that had just taken place within its walls. And as she drove away, she knew that this moment, like many before it, would remain etched in her memory, a testament to resilience, authority, and the unstoppable force of a woman who would never be underestimated again. She smiled again, softly, knowing she had not only reclaimed her funds, but also reclaimed the acknowledgement she had always deserved. Today was hers, not just in money, but in respect, in authority, and in undeniable presence.